The call came while the elevator stalled between floors, a soft chime, a pause that lasted too long. "Mr. Hale," the voice said, "legal, careful. The reading is today. We advise attendance." I watched my reflection ripple in the mirrored steel, a man who had been fired with a smile, a man whose mother had been lowered into the ground 3 days earlier. I pressed the phone to my ear, said nothing. "There are directives," the voice continued, "specific ones." The elevator jerked. My stomach followed. I remembered the CEO's office, the way the sunlight cut his desk in half, the way he didn't stand when I walked in wearing a black tie that still smelled like soil. "You should have planned better," he'd said, fingers steepled, voice mild. "Personal crises affect performance." No apology, no condolences, just a termination letter slid across polished wood. The elevator doors opened. I stepped out into a hallway that smelled of disinfectant and old money. Somewhere down the corridor, people were gathering, lawyers, board members, the same faces that had avoided my eyes at the funeral reception. My phone vibrated again. "And Mr. Hale," the voice added, lowering, "you will be required to report." "To whom?" I asked. A breath, a smile I could hear. "To her heir." The line went dead. I took a seat at the back of the room. Habit, years of being invisible had trained me well. The CEO sat near the front, legs crossed, jaw relaxed. He nodded to the attorney as if this were another quarterly briefing, as if the woman whose name crowned the documents hadn't once sat across from him at a diner at dawn, stirring cold coffee, saving his empire with a signature and a promise. He didn't know that part. He only knew the version of my mother he'd used, the quiet consultant, the anonymous lender, the shadow that banks didn't ask questions about when they said no. When she died, he sent flowers. Then he fired me. I told myself it was business, that betrayal doesn't always wear a knife. Sometimes it wears a tailored suit and calls it policy. The attorney began to read. Assets, accounts, trusts, the language of distance. I felt the old denial rise, the childish hope that this would be small, that her life had been simple, that I'd been wrong about the late-night calls, the locked drawers, the way she never let me touch her ledgers. Then the CEO shifted, a flicker. The attorney cleared his throat. "Regarding Hale Industries," he said. The room leaned forward. My pulse slowed. Months earlier, before the funeral, I'd started looking, quietly. I followed numbers the way other people follow ghosts. I pulled old filings, cross-referenced shell companies, traced loans that never touched daylight. I learned my mother's handwriting in margins, learned her tells. She'd saved them when banks refused, not out of charity, out of leverage. I never confronted her. Some truths rip when pulled too soon. After I was fired, the pieces aligned with brutal clarity. The CEO's sudden confidence, his ignorance, his belief that power was permanent. I watched him now, watched the way his fingers drummed when the attorney mentioned contingency clauses, watched sweat bead when the word convertible entered the room. Still no confrontation. I kept my face blank, let my grief calcify into focus. The attorney continued, voice steady, cruel in its precision. "Upon my client's passing, the controlling interest," the CEO laughed softly, a reflex. It died in his throat. "Reverts to the estate," the attorney said, "with immediate effect." Silence thickened. My mother had always said patience was a weapon. She'd taught me to sharpen it. The attorney turned a page. "The heir," he said, "is present." Eyes searched, landed on me, the back row, the fired son. I stood, slowly. The CEO's face drained of color. He looked at me as if seeing a stranger step out of a mirror. "That's not possible," he said, the only time his voice cracked. I met his gaze, calm, cold. "She planned better," I said. The attorney slid a folder across the table toward him. Documents bloomed like bruises, signatures, dates, clauses that tightened when he touched them. "You will," the attorney continued, "report to her heir." The CEO's mouth opened, closed. He looked small, betrayed, a man realizing the ground beneath him had always been borrowed. I felt nothing, not triumph, not anger, only alignment. After the room emptied, he cornered me by the window. "You knew," he said. "Accusation, plea." "I learned," I corrected. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I built." "You managed," I said. "She owned." I handed him my termination letter, the one he'd slid across his desk with such confidence. "HR will need this reversed," I added. "Or not." He stared at the paper like it might bite. "I'm not here to take your job," I said. "I'm here to redefine it." His shoulders sagged. The man who'd fired me after a funeral now waited for instructions from the son of the woman he'd underestimated. I stepped past him.